This is Dead Male Tales. Let us know how we're doing by liking the video, subscribing to our channel, click the bell icon if you want to be notified when we find another letter. On with the story. My dearest Samantha, it's been 7 days since I've sat down and written one of these letters. I finally made it to just east of Jackson, but it hasn't been without struggles. My progress has been painstakingly slow, and I'm beginning to wonder if I'll ever make it. So far, I'm 2 for 2 in the nearly dying while traveling department. When I woke up the next day at the school, my ankle was swollen 3 times its normal size. It was discolored and looked nasty. It was hurting and throbbing. There was no way I was going to be able to travel, especially with the infected possibly lurking around any corner. It was 5 days before I felt like I could continue on. I had already run out of food except for several bottles of honey and a few raw dry ingredients. I was also down to 1 jug of water, which wasn't as big of a concern due to all the water around the area. I wanted to wait another few days before leaving, but that just wasn't in the cards. I needed food and water. I had to make a decision about what to do next. The thought crossed my mind to see what the school had inside, but the cafeteria had big steel commercial doors with deadbolts. Trying to break into that place would have summoned every infected within earshot. I wasn't going to continue west towards Corinth and travel even further away from the Natchez Trace. I saw no stores or restaurants between where I almost died at the hands of the infected and the school. That left me with one option: to get on the trace and continue toward Natchez. So that's exactly what I did. I was beginning to suffer from hunger pangs, but the trace was so nice I didn't think about them too much. I saw no sign of the infected. In fact, I saw no sign of the apocalypse. It was as if the trace has some sort of magical force field which protected it from the hell that has devoured the rest of the planet. There were no abandoned cars, no signs of horrific struggles, and no repugnant smells. It was peaceful and quiet. Had I not known better, I would have sworn I was on a Sunday drive and the world had been put back together. It had been nearly 4 hours of peaceful traveling. Other than a growling stomach that I was quickly growing used to, everything had run smoothly. It was by far the best stretch of road I had experienced since leaving Alabama. Then I saw a sign that read Ross Barnett Reservoir. What a sight for sore eyes that was. That's just the thing a hungry man with fishing gear needs to see. I exited the trace and made my way to the reservoir. When I scouted the place, I found it had multiple campgrounds, boat ramps, parks, wooded areas with wildlife, and, of course, plenty of fish. The only thing missing was people. Why were there no people? This is the exact type of place that people should be flocking to during the apocalypse, right? I sat on a bench overlooking the water, trying to figure it out when I heard a faint buzzing sound. I spotted a wake off in the distance. There was a small aluminum boat on the reservoir coming toward me. I was surprised at my reaction. My first instinct was to grab my shotgun, and that's exactly what I did. By the time the boat made its way to the bank, I was looking straight down the barrel at the older man on the other side. He looked at me and said, "Whoa, son, ain't no need to be killing each other." I was very ashamed. I don't know if I reacted that way out of fear or shock, but I felt like I was in an episode of The Twilight Zone. I hadn't seen another human since our neighbor, or former neighbor, was chased back inside his home, only infected. Now, out of nowhere, right in front of me was a living, breathing human being. My brain needed a minute to comprehend it all. I snapped out of it, lowered my shotgun, and quickly apologized. As he secured his boat, he said, "That's okay, son. I'm a 73-year-old black man. Lived in Mississippi my whole life. This ain't my first trip to the juke joint." I wanted to die right there on the riverbank. I had managed to make this man, who was possibly the only other living person in Mississippi, think that I was one step away from donning a robe and a hood. I became flustered. "Oh, no, sir. You got me all wrong. I'm married to a..." Then I composed myself. "What I mean to say is I'm sorry." Then he began laughing. Not just a light chuckle, but a full-on, doubled-over, side-splitting laugh that lasted every bit of a minute. He looked up and said, "Gotcha," and I started laughing too. He introduced himself as Curtis Booker. His wife passed away 3 years ago, and his only son lives in New York. According to him, the military attempted to set up a safe zone around Jackson. That's why no one but him was at the reservoir. He said he liked his chances of survival more where he grew up, hunting and fishing, than being trapped in a cage. He'd been here since this thing began, and when no one else showed up, he decided he was better off staying. Curtis offered to take me back to his camp and feed me. I accepted before he got the words out of his mouth. I was so hungry. I could almost feel my insides gnawing on each other. I stepped inside his boat and we headed across the reservoir. His camp setup was awesome. He had a small 4-person camper, a rack full of smoked meat, baskets of dried wild cranberries, and an outside fire pit, complete with a cooking rack. He had smoked fish and smoked venison, but the absolute best thing he had back at his camp was the smartest dog I've ever seen. A year-old, solid black sheepadoodle named Cash. The three of us sat around the campfire and ate plenty yesterday evening. It was getting dark by the time we finished eating. Curtis insisted that I stay at his camp overnight, and then he would take me back to my van on the other side of the reservoir today. My arm didn't need much twisting. I hadn't been that comfortable since the day everything changed. I woke up this morning to Cash licking my face. When I went outside, I didn't see Curtis around camp. After closer inspection, I realized his pickup was missing. I thought that he had maybe gone on an early morning fishing trip and decided to let me rest at camp. I didn't think about it too much because Cash and I were about to eat a smoked fish and venison breakfast. As we were finishing our breakfast, I heard Curtis's pickup in the distance, getting louder by the second. Cash's ears perked up, instantly recognizing the sound. As the pickup approached the camp, I saw the antlers of a deer barely poking out over the edge of the truck bed. Curtis got out of his truck, but he didn't look so hot. When I asked if he was okay, he said, "One of those things, a lost straggler, I reckon, attacked me in the woods when I was loading that deer up. Blasted thing brought blood when it bit my arm." He held it up to show me, and I could see the deep teeth marks it left behind. "But it ain't round no more to bite nothing else. Seen to that." I was instantly concerned. From my own encounter with the infected, I'd already theorized that the virus may spread that way. Though I didn't say anything. There was no reason to. I immediately helped him clean and wrap the wound. Other than looking a little worn down from all the excitement, he seemed fine. From personal experience, I know how tangling with those monsters makes you feel afterward. Looking worn down is to be expected. So I thought perhaps my educated guess about how the virus spreads was wrong. After we had gotten his wound taken care of, Curtis wanted to go lay down in the camper. I told him to go rest, and I would process the deer that he had brought back. He was capable, both mentally and physically, to be a man in his 70s. He field dressed the deer and then loaded it by himself using a couple of ramps, a rope, and a chain fall. Now it was time for me to repay him for his hospitality. With the addition of the fat I could harvest from the deer, I now had all the necessary ingredients available to make your grandmother's pemmican recipe. Well, at least a close copy of it. I worked for hours crushing dried meat and fruit, making suet. It produced a lot of pemmican, and I couldn't wait to surprise Curtis with it when he woke up. It was late this afternoon when I finally heard him stirring about inside the camper. I was sitting by the fire with Cash, enjoying a fresh batch of pemmican when I heard a crash inside the camper. I thought the old man had fallen. I rushed over and opened the door. Standing there, something that resembled Curtis, with a milky white overlay to its cracked skin and vacant eyes, slowly looked down at me. Cash started barking incessantly at this thing that used to be his only friend. I took a step back and it lunged out of the camper door toward me. It missed the step and fell face first to the ground. It was slow to get back up. Both Cash and I were backing slowly away from it. The monster was between us and my shotgun. The 65-pound compound bow Curtis used for hunting was still in the pickup. I hurried over to the truck and grabbed the bow. With a slight tremble, I nocked an arrow, drew, and released. Miss. The arrow hit the shoulder. I grabbed another arrow, but this time I remembered to exhale before releasing. Whoosh, thuck, direct hit. It went limp and crumpled to the ground. Cash laid down and whimpered. I laid with him. Rest in peace, Curtis Booker. I just finished burying the body of what used to be Curtis. He was a fine old man. He reminded me of my grandpa. To hell with this world. I met and killed the only person I've talked to since you left for Seattle, all within a 24-hour period. Can you imagine how that would have sounded 2 months ago? I'm neck deep in it, and it still sounds strange. But it doesn't feel strange. Well, it doesn't feel as strange as it should feel. It's still incredibly sad, but it feels, I don't know, like a new normal maybe? At any rate, I have to get refocused. Compartmentalize. I'm now going to tarp and trailer the boat and load up all the food, water, fuel, and supplies to take with me. I have another mouth to feed now, and he loves smoked fish. So, I'm taking it all. I'm taking everything except the camper. I thought about taking the camper, but the van provides me with enough space to lay my head. It's safer, and there's plenty of room for Cash, too. Besides, the boat can be a much more useful tool in helping me secure food down the road. If by some chance you're traveling down the trace in the future and see a yellow Nirvana smiley face on the old Ross Barnett Reservoir sign, just know that I made it past this point. If you're following my trail, my next letter stop will be near the Wallace Lake region, just south of Shreveport. Look for the yellow thing that smiles back at you. Well, I have to get moving so I can park by nightfall. As long as I keep breathing and my heart keeps beating, I will keep marching forward. I love you more than I can express with my limited vocabulary. Don't you dare make an Alabama joke if you ever read this. I love you, Sam. From the wasteland, Dalton.